we go. Okay, Simon, show is yours.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everybody to this session on working with Hadoop with the CA Workload Automation product suite. Let me just get past the usual legal disclaimers. And so this session was created by me a short while back when I had to understand our capabilities with regards to how we can schedule workload into Hadoop, to understand basically what are job types that we would support, how we would do an installation, and to try to get an understanding as to what the value was. Why would we encourage our customers to use the advanced integration? So I went through a bit of a learning curve. Started off with understanding Hadoop. There's some good information out on the web. Google is your friend, as always, to get over some basic concepts. And it became apparent that Hadoop is a platform that we can schedule to in the same respect as what we can do with PeopleSoft and Oracle and the likes. So for us, it's just a way of extending our scheduling capabilities into more areas and more platforms. And these slides that I'm about to work through are my basically a catalogue of my discovery of how to install, how to configure, and then the creation of some basic Hadoop jobs. Because what we're finding is that one of the advantages of Hadoop is that it's based on what you might call commodity hardware. So more and more organizations are able to explore the value of big data to produce business analytics. So, customers can make decisions on how they might go to market and provide more products and services for their customers. So more and more of our customers that use our workload automation toolsets are starting to explore big data via the Hadoop platform. And that's why we find that it's becoming more and more of interest to our customers, which is why we want to know what the capabilities are that we can support. So what I'm going to take you through, as I say, is a bit of a discovery for the journey that I went through. Initially, installing the plugin, and then working out how to actually configure the plugin, the Hadoop integration plugin, into an Hadoop environment. And then talk about the various job types that we can support, examples of how we can define those jobs, and the sort of functions that they can perform for us. And then finally, because all of my examples are based around Workload Automation DE, but it's important to point out that the plugin is supported via AutoSys and EE as well. And as such, although the examples given in this session are DE-based, I've got some screenshots showing you what it looks like inside of AutoSys as well. So the first thing I had to do was go get the plugin. It's not very big, doesn't take long to download, and as you would expect, it's on the CA support website so that you can download. This version, when I did this screenshot, 12.0.00.01, the latest version is 02. There's not a great difference between them, but there is one key difference that I will point out in the next slide or two. So, yeah, first off, working on the assumption that you've already got a Linux agent installed, obviously we need an agent in place before we can then put the plugin down. So the assumption for my installation was that the agent was already installed. So you need to know whether or not you've got an environment that you can support, where you can support your Hadoop distribution. So we're currently supporting these three distributions of Hadoop. There are a few others that are available, but these are the most common ones. And one thing, if anybody is interested in, taking these slides and then trying the installation, config, and job definitions yourself, you might not have access to Hadoop. I mean, especially if you're workload specialists and you're not Hadoop specialists. One of the questions is, well, where do I get Hadoop from? So I did a bit of Googling again, and I found a Cloudera single node virtual machine that they make available to anybody who wishes to download and explore Cloudera's distribution of Hadoop. And that was the virtual machine that I used to connect to for my my environment. So yeah, go get yourself an Hadoop, and then you're ready to install an agent and a plugin, and then you can start to explore the various job types. One note, I mentioned previously that my examples here are based around DE, but we support the three main scheduling engines, and on the distributed side, Autosys and DE, as I've mentioned. How to actually define the jobs are going to be specific to the individual products. So depending on which of these you may be running, then refer to the appropriate documentation, not for the actual plugin installation itself. That is a separate plugin install document for the Hadoop Advanced Integration. But once you've got it installed, if you want to see what jobs can be defined and what parameters pass to those jobs, then yeah, refer to the documentation outlined here. Right, so this is something that's changed now. At the time that I did my install, the documentation says that you have to have a minimum level of 11.3 service pack for maintenance level 2. The problem that I found was that if you have a newer edition of the workload agent, the installer still complains. With the version of Hadoop that I was installing, which was 12.0.0.01, it only supported or tolerated this specific version. So, if you've already downloaded the Hadoop plugin and you've got this version, then you have to have a specific version of the agent, because if you don't have the specific version of the agent, you'll get this error message when you try to do the installation. Now, if you go to the if you go to CA support now and download the latest version of the plugin, that has been documented as one of the things that has been fixed. So you should find that as long as you've got at least this level, you'll be fine. And if you've got a later version of the agents, that the installer will now tolerate that as well. So this is really just a bit of a gotcha that I found, which caused me a bit of a problem because I had to then install a down-level agent just to get this Hadoop testing in place. If you download the latest Hadoop, you won't have that problem anymore. So you download the plugin and navigate to the directory where you've placed the installer, and you run the setup. It's simple. There aren't too many questions. It's nice and easy. Where do you want to install the plugin? Point it obviously to a directory where you've installed the agent previously. And that's it. There is very little to do to get the plugin installed. There's not many questions that are required. I didn't screenshot all of the dialogue, but there wasn't much there that would vex anybody, I suspect. One question that comes up, which is, where would I install my agent and or my plugin? Would I install it on the Hadoop estate, or can I install it, remotely outside of the Hadoop estate? You may not, have access to Hadoop. It may be a case of that the platform is owned by an area whose responsibility at Hadoop means that they won't let you install local code on their Hadoop server. And that's fine, because the way that the plugin communicates with Hadoop is by doing an SSH on default port 22. So I did install my agent on the Cloudera VM, and I did install my plugin on the Cloudera VM. And I've been working with a customer over in Italy. They did the same. They chose to install the agent and the plugin onto an Hadoop node, but it then just does an SSH to itself anyway. So you have choices based on constraints laid down by customers and the guys that own the Hadoop infrastructure. Once you've installed your agent and your plugin, you will see a couple of entries here. I've got one called Cloudera and one called Hadoop. The Cloudera is the agent, Hadoop is the plugin, and it basically needs to know how to communicate with the plugin. So this is a standard DE configuration requirement where you give it the host name, the port number, and encryption details. In this case, I was using AES. And at that point, you should find that if you start your agent up, your Cloudera and Hadoop will go into an active status. One thing that I found, and I'm still trying to work out what the cause is that when you start the agent, it goes active in the topology view here pretty much immediately, as you would expect, whereas the plugin stays inactive for a period of time. And I've found that it's usually best to go away for a couple of minutes and then come back, because restarting or bouncing the DE server or refreshing the screen, it doesn't do anything, it doesn't seem to help. So when you're installing your plugin, if you have a go at this, if you find that you think you've got all of the encryption parameters right and the server, the host name and the ports are correct, if you're comfortable that you've done this bit correctly, then chances are if you just leave it alone for a few minutes, it will eventually go active. But at this point, all we've done is we've put down the plugin and made it available to the DE scheduling engine. We do have some additional configuration actions that we need to perform, and we're going to cover those now. So the first thing that I needed to do was to create a connection profile. And this connection profile, the first tab, part of the tab on the right-hand side, you'll see it mentions general parameters. And this is basically so that the plugin can do an SSH connection to the Hadoop edge node. And so my Hadoop was called quickstart.cloudera, which was the name of the VM machine that I downloaded, and I kept with the default port 22. There are two other sets of connection parameters that I defined. One was the Hive database and one was for Sqoop. Now the Hive database, not being a Hadoop expert, not by any means, it wasn't quite clear to me, what these values ought to be. So again, what I did was did some Googling on Cloudera's Hadoop and Hive JDBC connections, and I took those values from what I found when I did the Googling. Those values are not mentioned in the CA documentation. With regards to the Sqoop database, and we will briefly talk about Hive jobs and Sqoop jobs in a couple of slides' time, but with Sqoop in particular, it is designed to aid the moving of data into and out of Hadoop. So you can, Hadoop is all about processing big data, and producing analytics from that. That data has to come from somewhere. And it may well be stored in a relational database in an environment completely external to Hadoop. And so the Hadoop platform provides some tools to help get data into Hadoop ready for processing. And one of those is called Sqoop. And what I've done here is I've created a connection URL to my Workload Automation database for no other reason than I needed a data source and that one was available to me. So I've connected it to my Workload Automation DER12 database, and I've mentioned the connection port, database name, etc. Okay, so that will be used later on when I want to import some data into Hadoop. So that was the parameters that were needed on the connection profile. The last thing I had to do before I was ready to start submitting jobs and testing, really, whether or not it was up and running, was the security profiles. And there were 3 security profiles. One was the database login. So if I go back to the previous slide, here I've specified the database that I wish to connect to. It's on the DE server, it's the EFP database, and I've mentioned the port. But then, of course, you need access to it, and that's where here I've stored a user ID and password, and that will be referenced in my Sqoop job, which I will show you in a few minutes. HDFS, again, you know, when you're connecting to Hadoop, if you wish to perform actions on the Hadoop file system, then you need access rights, and the username and password these are the username and passwords that were provided when I downloaded the Cloudera VM. Basically, you know, any user ID that was required was Cloudera, the password was Cloudera. So it's very simple to set up that security profile. And then finally, when I wish to run Hive jobs, I also needed a security profile, and again, the only access user IDs I needed on my Cloudera, but it's the same set of user ID and passwords throughout. So at this stage, you might notice that my Cloudera and my Cloudera Hadoop have now gone active. So I know that I've got communications with the agent and the plugin. I've created a connection profile, and I've got some user ID and passwords stored. So after that, it was just a case of defining some jobs and seeing what I could do. So here is the list of job types that our Hadoop Advanced Integration supports. There are a set of actions that you can perform on the Hadoop file system. So we can do HDFS file system actions. And we'll see a bit more about that in a few minutes. We can run Hive scripts. So if you've written any programs using the Hive environment, we can execute them. Pig is another script type language used for consuming data to help produce reports for analytics. I have an example of HDFS and I have an example of Pig, just so that you can see the sort of things that we can do. So we'll be going back to the Pig scripts shortly. Sqoop, we already talked about, is used for importing and outporting, importing and exporting data to and from Hadoop. And then Oozie. Oozie is the scheduler that you get with Hadoop. So it's very similar, I suppose, to SAP. You know, we know that SAP has its own scheduler built in, and it's very good for scheduling SAP workflows. But it's not so good if you then want cross-platform dependencies and you want to create complex business workflows that involve platforms outside of SAP. It's similar with Hadoop. The Oozie workflows are designed to help Hadoop process data to produce these analytics. It doesn't really know anything about external platforms or external job types, but we can interact with Oozie to trigger predefined workflows and monitor their execution. So, job specifics, the Hadoop file system. Now, the slide deck that was loaded mentioned that there were 4 supported actions for this job type, where in fact there's more like 6. But the bottom line is it's about file and directory manipulation. So we can delete directories and create directories and delete files and create files. And basically get the HDFS file system ready for us to send it some data. I guess if you were an Hadoop specialist, you know, that was your area of expertise, you might have all sorts of reasons why you need to manipulate HDFS file system, and we can support some of those actions through these job types. So here is the HDFS job type. I've opened up the edit, basically the editor for the job, and there are a couple of fields I've had to fill in. There's the advanced integration, where it says Cloudera Hadoop. That's the plugin. Then that's fine. You're talking to your plugin, but you need the connection profile. Otherwise, it won't be able to do the SSH connection to the Hadoop edge node. So that's where the Hadoop connection profile comes in. And these are available as drop-downs. Okay, you don't have to remember them. You might have, you know, a number of Hadoop environments. You might have a number of connection profiles. They're available to you as a drop-down, which isn't shown here, but they are there. The more you define, the more you'll see. The security profile was taken for logging onto HDFS, and then the file operation. And in this case, I've chosen to delete a file or a directory. And if you look down, there is some parameters that I've added where I'm getting rid of /tmp/SimonTest1. Now it's tempting to think that that is just the temp directory, and that SimonTest1 is just another file or directory under temp. But in fact, it's not, because if you logged onto Hadoop and navigate around the normal file system, you don't actually see these. They are actually part of the HDFS file system, not the Linux file system. Something else that I changed was the job status refresh. I think the default was something like 60 seconds, which meant when I was submitting my jobs, I was sat there waiting for ages before I knew if they were working. So just for your own sanity, you might want to drop the refresh down to, here for example, is 10 seconds. So to actually take an action on the Hadoop server to perform a HDFS operation was as simple as filling in these few parameters. Another option was to make the directory, and I'm not going to dwell on it, but you know, we said there were 4 or 5 actions that you can take: make a directory, make a file, remove a directory, copy a directory, etc. So this is just another example of the actions that you can take. And then when the job comes to completion, okay, you can retrieve the Sqoop file, and you'll notice that pretty much all we're doing is issuing a HDFS command, okay, with a DFS minus touch Z. So it's simply passing that command line to the HDFS file system. And at that point, I knew that my job had been successful. And this was the first job that I ran to prove that my plugin was working, that my connection profiles, my security profiles, and that, you know, everything was in a good place and working fine. The next one that I moved on to, you know, after I'd worked out that HDFS was okay, was to look at Sqoop, testing my understanding and testing the capabilities of the different job types. So again, the advanced integration, or you know, the plugin that you select was Cloudera Hadoop. The same Hadoop connection profile, because I'm talking to a single Cloudera node, HDFS login, and also you'll notice for this one there is the Sqoop security profile, which is the logon access to my ESP DE database. And the action that I selected here was to import a table from I've got a Microsoft SQL database running for my DE, I'm going to import data from a table in that database and store it. And here you'll see I'm storing it under /temp/Simon test1 DE test table test. Now, that was the directory that I created with the HDFS job. So for this to work, I needed that destination directory to exist. Is there anything else to mention here? No, I think we're good to go. So I put these two together because there comes a point when what you want to do is try to string together a set of actions where you actually perform some useful outcome. So my first job was to delete that table because when I ran the job again to import it, it said it was already there. So my first job was to do a bit of tidying up, delete DE table 1 test, and my second job was to run the Sqoop import. And one field that we didn't mention in the previous screenshot was the table name. So we know that the Sqoop connection profile told it to talk to my ESP database, but it's here in the job definition where I actually specified the table that I was interested in. I just picked one that I knew had something in it that I was easy to understand, and we could easily recognize the data that's being imported. So that's it. That was the Sqoop test, and this was the output. This was the data that I'd received. We can see the SQL statement being executed, select asterisk from ESP application. So that sort of gave me a warm feeling that things are okay. You can see the commands, the Sqoop commands. Okay, so we're just executing native Sqoop syntax. And at the bottom, I can see that 27 records were imported. Okay, so moving on. Pig. Okay, so we know we can manipulate the Hadoop file system, and we know we can now import data into Hadoop. We're sort of building a use case here, and the use case is I want Hadoop to process some enterprise data so that I can get some business analytics. Well, we created a file system, we imported some data, and now what we've got is another way of importing data and then processing it. So we've got a pig job type. The usual parameters, the connection profile, the security profile to get access to the file system. But now we've got something new that we've not looked at before. I'm actually executing a script, and pig is its own scripting language, its own syntax. And what I did, again, I used Google. I'm not a pig expert. I don't know anything about pig scripting. So I Googled it, and I found an example of some scripts, also with some supplied data. And I downloaded these scripts, and I downloaded the data so that I could test out this job type and see what would happen. Something else worth noting, there's an additional parameter here, -v. So when I was researching the pig scripting language and the way that you can execute them, I came across a list of all the parameters that it supports when you execute pig scripts, and -v was for verbose, and I felt that was a good thing because it meant when I was reviewing the output and the syslog, I could ascertain, just how well things were working. So that's a little tip. If you are going to run some of these scripts and you want to investigate the output in detail, see if you've got a switch that you can use, and in this case, -v is valid. This was the script that I downloaded off of the internet after doing the Google search, and it's very simple. It points to a CSV file, and then it uses the appropriate pig syntax to import the data. And again, all I'm really trying to do is test the job type? Is it going to work for my Hadoop implementation, my Cloudera? Does the pig job type seem to work for me? So I have data, I have scripts. All I then needed to do was run the job. And again, you'll start to see a trend here. When we ran the HDFS job, the HDFS job simply does an SSH to Hadoop and issues the appropriate command line. It did it with HDFS, it did it with Sqoop, but now you can see that we call the pig command line interpreter. We give it a location for the script, the file it needs to execute, the -v was passed to it, and that ran and loaded the data. I actually thought I had a screenshot of the data that was loaded, but it's not included on this particular slide deck. But that job ran successfully and loaded that CSV data. So because Hadoop is all about processing data, we've now had two sources. We had one that was a table of a relational database and another that was a CSV. And that's just a simple example of importing or processing data from two different sources. And this slide is really about bringing it all together. This is the value proposition, really. This is the use case. Why might we want to introduce CA workload automation into an Hadoop environment? So here is a workflow, okay? And it's made up of a number of Unix jobs. You can see them here, Unix job 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. There's a database job, a SQL job, okay? Maybe loading some data, who knows? But these are jobs that are running outside of Hadoop. But what I've then done is I've then introduced some Hadoop jobs. So what I'm saying is I've got a bunch of Unix jobs that run and might be, processing all sorts of transactional data that's been loaded during the day. And then I'm doing some database manipulation. Then I deleted my HDFS file because I want my demonstration to be repeatable. I had to delete it. Otherwise, when I do a create, it says it's already there. I imported the data into Hadoop using Sqoop. And then, and this is an example of me calling, you can't see the details, but this is an Oozie job type because you use the Oozie workflows to actually run a lot of the map reduce functions that are used to process all of this big data. And so what I'm saying here in this slide is that I've got some external activities that need to be completed before I can then import some data into Hadoop. Before Hadoop can then use, I can call Oozie workflows to do some complex Hadoop data crunching. And then I've then said that once the Hadoop processing is complete, I need to run some more external jobs. And this encapsulates for me the use case, which is to bring Hadoop into the enterprise. Because without this, you've got an Hadoop cluster, which could be made up of 10, hundreds or thousands of nodes, lots of CPU compute capability, lots of disk space, great stuff going on, but you do have the challenge of how do you get data into Hadoop at the right time, in the right format, and then what if you want to then perform additional processing when Hadoop has done its work on an external environment? And this is the final use case for me that shows why we would want the advanced integration. And then finally, we're almost done with the journey of learning how to connect workload automation into Hadoop. Everything that I've shown so far has been configuring workload automation DE, and that begs the question for all your Autosys people out there. It's supported, yeah. You've got your connection profiles, you've got your security profiles. You insert a machine with the right parameters to get the plugin defined, and then inside the workload control center, you'll see that you've got the same job types exposed. This is through, so through the workload control center, the 5 job types, and here you can see them in the application editor. You would then configure them in the same way that you did in DE, and it's all fully supported. So scheduler agnostic, install the agent, install the plugin, set up your connection profiles, your logon profiles, etc., and then define some jobs. And that, in a nutshell, is the advanced integration. So at that, I will stop talking and ask if anybody has got any questions they wish to ask.
Hey, Simon, we actually got a few that came in already. One came from Pushkar. Can we connect to Keyboard's cluster?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Let me send you the message. I'm not sure exactly. I'll IM it to you real quick.
Yeah, let me just see what that message says. Can we go to Kerberos? Now, I don't even know what a Kerberos cluster is. Oh, do you mean using Kerberos, not using user ID and passwords?
I'll see if he replies, but I'm assuming that's what he's meaning for now.
Yeah, that is supported. You don't have to use user ID and passwords for the security and the connection profiles. So if you mean Kerberos, then yes, I believe that is supported. I didn't dabble with that. I didn't want to get into a world of pain with the security side, but I think you'll find that that's supported, yes. Okay.
We got another question from Timothy Bartley. Is the connection profile required as a prerequisite, or is it that just so there is a set of default connection values?
If you don't have the connection profile, then you can't complete the job definition. So the connection profiles need to be there.
Okay, and he has a follow-up to that. Can those values be overridden in the job definition, or do additional connection profiles have to be defined with different values? We are using ESP and just beginning to test the Hadoop plugin.
Now, that's not something I've tried. Actually, if you bear with me, I've actually got, let me just come out of this presentation, which seems to have taken over my screen. I do actually have DE up and running here, and if I go into the define, let me just share my screen again. Bear with me, edit, and VMware. Right, can you see my, so if we edit this job and we look at the connection profiles, you see, you can't override them because they contain more than one value. They've got a user ID and password. So you will need to define the connection profiles and then select them from a drop-down. Okay.
Yep, we got another question from Frank Duran. Is this plugin available for CA7?
No. Oh. Unfortunately not. Just the 3 at the moment. ESP, DE, and AE, Autosys.
Okay. For this question from David Harwood. Hi, Simon. For ESP installations, will you be able to provide examples of configuration?
I guess we could. I don't have any to hand. But if we take this away, if you bear with me, I'll just write a question. I'll write this down because we can maybe follow up by sending that information out after this call.
Okay. Great. We can do that.
Bear with me. I'll write this number 1. Okay. Next one.
Okay. The next one is from Bob Brandt. Does the automatic Hadoop agent have all of the same functionality, or with the recent acquisition of Atomic by CA, will all this functionality be added to the automatic Hadoop agent?
So this is a question around the Atomic acquisition, yes?
Yes.
So the Hadoop advanced integration was something that was developed irrespective of Atomic. So we have the capability that I've described to you in this presentation, and then we've got whatever it is that Automic brings to the table. Now, over time, we guess that the plan will be to leverage all of the clever technology that Automic have. But at the moment, the capabilities are kept separate. If you use Automic, you've got whatever capabilities they have. If you use DE, Autosys, or ESP with the plugin, you've got the capability described in this presentation. Going forward, you know, we've been told we're obviously going to leverage all of the technology that we've acquired, but there's no roadmap yet. We don't know the details of what that means.
Okay, we got 2 questions from Greg Wade. Does the plugin run for Windows, and does the plugin connect to MapR?
Okay, the plugin does not run on Windows. It's a Linux plugin. In fact, on the documentation, if you just bear with me, I've got the documentation here somewhere. I can actually tell you, where is it? Getting started guide. Yeah, supported platforms. Yeah, basically it's Linux. No Windows on this one, I'm afraid. And with regards MapR, there is no job type for MapR, but the get out of jail card for us with regards, you know, other components of Hadoop is to go through Oozie. So if there was an Oozie workflow that was performing some MapR functions, we could call the Oozie workflows.
Okay, I guess I am due another question that came in.
Okay. Can we execute Spark jobs? Again, I would say, you know, there is no. If we look at the, if you think about the slide that I showed you with Autosys, and it showed you those 5 job types. Each one is a specific job type. One is Hive, one is Oozie, one is Pig, etc. The only way we would be able to execute Spark jobs at the moment would be to call it via Oozie.
Those are all questions I'm seeing right now. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to use the Q&A box and send them on in. Just give people a moment or two to enter any text.
Yeah.
Anything.
For sure, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a good point, actually. MapR, yeah. So, the 4 major distributions, Cloudera, Hortonworks, IBM, and MapR. I just came across that one today. So, it's not on our list of supported platforms. So, no MapR. I'm not saying it wouldn't work, because we do an SSH, and we're calling standard HDFS, standard Sqoop functions. I'm not saying it wouldn't work. What I am saying is it's not supported. So we've got Cloudera, Hortonworks, and IBM Big Insights. But I reckon that if you were just experimenting and you just wanted to explore the capabilities, I'm willing to bet that you would be able to get the plugin to talk to MapR. That's my guess.
All right, no other questions have come in, Simon.
So just on that last one on the MapR, I mean, if you had a Linux box running and you put an agent and the Hadoop plugin down, and then you had your MapR infrastructure, you know, someplace else, obviously, you would then create your connection profiles with the port 22 SSH, etc., with the correct user ID and passwords for logging in. My guess is that as we call HDFS or we call Sqoop, it wouldn't know that it was MapR. That's my guess. Right, okay, so I've got one action to take away, which is to see if we can find some examples of the connection profiles for ESP. Are there any final questions?
Not seeing anything coming in.
Yeah, in which case, I guess that everybody gets 12 minutes of their life back, which should be a good thing.
Thank you very much, Simon. And just so everybody knows, this recording, we'll post it onto the communities by the end of the day.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. Have a great day.
And you. Goodbye.